Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning from wherever you're joining us from today. I have Asha Lee here and myself, of course, Florence. We are going to be talking today about international student obligation and PGWP eligibility in Canada. I'm just going to let Asha do intros here before we get into it. We have a very short time, so we want to get into everything we want to talk about.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you all. Looking forward to today's session. So I think this is a very, very, very important session that we're having today for our international students. I remember a former client of mine had given me a call when she arrived in Canada, and she said to me, "Hi, Aisha, I'm here." And I was like, "I'm so happy for you. Are you aware of the conditions on your study permit?" And she goes, "Yeah, I know the conditions. You mean the ones that are printed on the permit that say you can't work in certain sectors?" And I was like, "Yeah, those, but I mean like the actual conditions." She's like, "What are you talking about?" And that's when I realized a lot of people are just under the impression only what's printed on their permit is their conditions, but there's actually so much more. So I'm happy that we can have this session today to kind of go over everything and make sure all of our international students are aware.
Yeah, absolutely. And we decided to do this session too because, of course, internally we see a lot of inquiries, we see a lot of cases, and a lot of people are running into trouble. And I always tell people that have been around long enough to see that the climate has changed with immigration. When you don't comply with your study permit regulations while you're a student, it complicates everything for you going forward. It's difficult even when you get out of status to even apply to get back into status right now with the number of international students in Canada and of course the government trying to reduce that number. The slightest thing that you do wrong is an opportunity for them to just say, get out of here, right? So you need to be very careful and really comply with the regulations. So what we're going to do here for everyone that's listening, we're going to focus on talking about the content, the details that we want to share with you. And at the end of it, we will take questions. So that way, maybe your question might be answered as we're going through. So listen through as we go ahead here. So these are the things we're going to be talking about, of course, international students obligation and then PGWP. And these are the topics we're going to be covering today to keep you informed on what the expectations are. So we're going to start out here. Asha is going to start out with enrolling as a full-time student. What does that mean and what are you supposed to do?
Perfect. Okay, so enrolled as a full-time student or actively pursuing your studies. So when it comes to maintaining the conditions on your study permit, IRCC wants to see that you're making reasonable progression towards completing your studies, whether that is maintaining a part-time load or maintaining a full-time load. Either of them is allowed in terms of maintaining the conditions on your study permit. However, this is one of the one of the gray areas that a lot of people are not aware of. Yes, you can be a part-time student and meet the conditions of your study permit. However, if you're a part-time student throughout your studies, it's going to become a problem for you when it comes time to apply for your PGWP. Right? So technically, if you're looking to extend your study permit and you're part-time, you've met your conditions. However, in the long term, it's not advisable. So the best thing that you can do is maintain a full-time course load. It's very important that you connect with your school. Different schools have different full-time course loads. So whether that's 3 courses or 4 courses or 5 courses, it's going to be different across every single school. So what you want to do is ensure that you maintain your full-time course load in every single semester. I cannot stress this enough. Don't take part-time one semester and full-time the next semester and then back to part-time and full-time. Maintain your full-time studies throughout each semester, aside from when you're on an excluded break. So whether that's like your reading week or your holidays or anything like that, then you're fine. But and then for summer sessions as well, that's something you need to talk to your school about. Some schools and some programs consider summer sessions to be a part of the academic year. Some of them don't. So it's really important that you're well informed with what your school considers to be full-time. And then that way you can ensure that you're maintaining your full-time course load.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And there is also one exception that I should mention there too is if you're in your final year of studies and you've taken all your classes and that final semester has to be part-time, that's acceptable under the immigration law. So that's the one exception. Aside from that, just ensure that you're full-time in all regular semesters that you have for your program. Authorized leave from school. This has put a lot of people in trouble. Um, IRCC allows international students to take up to 150 days off school with approval from the school. And so if you're taking a break, you can't continue school for whatever reason, you can take up to 150 days. But it's not just taking 150 days. I say, I just said 150 days, I'm fine. I'm not going to school for 150 days. No, your school needs to be aware and actually approve that. If you want to ensure that you don't get in trouble with IRCC, you want to ensure that you get that approval in writing from your school. It is so important. Because when you're going to be applying for your PGWP, you're applying to extend your status, the officers, one of the important documents that will be included in your application is going to be a transcript. And that transcript that will be included will reveal to the officer if you were going to school or not. It will reveal to the officer if you took time off school or not. And if you are going to take more than 150 days from school, it is important that you work towards switching your status to a visitor or even leaving the country during that time. So this is something that we have seen get a lot of students in trouble where they are no longer eligible for their PGWP and even lose out on even extending their status. Like we have clients now where we're begging IRCC to just allow them back into the country to finish 3 classes so that they can graduate, just because when they applied for that extension, they had taken more than enough, more time off school. So it's really important. This is so important. You don't want to miss it. When in doubt, speak with IRCC, speak with the International Students Office, and ensure that you are compliant with this policy so that everything you've worked hard for just doesn't go to waste because you took time off and did not know what you were supposed to do with it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. So just to add on to what Florence was saying, not every single situation is considered to be an authorized leave. There are very specific examples that schools and IRCC both take into consideration. So the biggest thing, and what I want to reiterate in terms of what you said, Florence, is have it in writing. Have it in writing. If it's a phone call and it comes down to you getting an ADR or PFL and you have to explain yourself, you don't have any proof of it. So have all this information in writing. When it comes to traveling outside of Canada, a lot of people don't understand that a study permit and a TRV are not the same thing. So the easiest way to explain it is permits are printed. They're physical pieces of paper. The TRV is stamped into your passport, right? So the TRV is what allows you in and out of Canada. The study permit is what's giving you status inside of Canada as a student that allows you to study, right? So not always does IRCC issue TRVs to the full duration of your program. For whatever reason, maybe your TRV was only given for X amount of time and your actual study permit is still valid. That means you can continue to remain in Canada because your study permit is valid. However, if you leave the country and you don't have a valid stamp in your passport, they will not allow you back in the country. They won't let you back in. Although you have status in the country, you have your valid study permit. If you don't have a valid TRV, you're not getting back into Canada. So it's really important to be able to distinguish the two. They're very different. They have very different purposes. Anytime you do want to travel, number one, make sure you're allowed. You're not taking any unnecessary time off school. If it is going to be an authorized leave for yourself, have it in writing. And make sure your actual TRV is valid.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had situations where people have called us because they took time off school and were outside the country and trying to travel back in, and we're not allowed to board that plane. Especially we're getting close to the holidays, so people are planning their trips to go home. I don't know what the current processing time for getting that TRV in Canada is, but it is pretty quick. So you want to, if you're thinking about leaving Canada in December here to visit family and travel and take a break, make sure you have your TRV to allow you entry back into Canada. All right.
I'll also add this. So when you apply for your initial study permit, when you get approved, you get the passport request. They actually stamp the visa in your passport. However, if you're applying for anything inside of Canada, whether it's a study permit extension, your postgraduate work permit, anything that you apply for in terms of an extension of status is not, they don't send a passport request. The passport request is a one-time thing that happens when you're applying for your first study permit outside of Canada. So in the future, if you do apply for an extension, don't assume they're going to give you a visa. You have to apply for that separately.
Yeah, you have to apply for that separately. Absolutely. Thanks for clarifying. So you can see that with immigration, there's just a lot, especially when you're in country, and it takes it takes a little miss to completely be on the other side of the law. So you want to be careful at all times with that as well. Well, September just passed. And we have also seen situations where students arrive in Canada, were supposed to start school in September, and for whatever reason decided not to start school. A lot of times there are good reasons for that, but when it comes to IRCC, no reason is a good reason if you got a study permit to come into Canada to study. So you have to know that if you are deferring your enrollment and you're already in Canada, you're deferring, you have to be planning to start school within 150 days. Your school should be notified, and I would add, update IRCC. Let IRCC know that you have deferred your admission to a different start date to start studying. So you don't just want to defer your admission and then start working. If you come in and you defer your admission, you cannot start working, even if your study permit says that you can work. This is another miss that people have done, where you start working when you're not supposed to. So if you've deferred, your school needs to know. Get something in writing. IRCC needs to know, and you need to plan to start school within 150 days. If not, change your status or leave Canada, just so that you're not contradicting you're not contravening any of the policies.
Perfect. Okay. And this is another really important thing, extending your study permit, extending your status. So ideally, at minimum, what you want to do is apply for your study permit within 30 days of its expiry. At the absolute bare minimum, apply for that permit before it expires. So IRCC uses UTC time. So that's something to know. You don't want to apply on the day that your permit expires. You don't want to apply the day before the permit expires. The portal goes down. The portal goes down at the worst possible times, and there's nothing that you can do about it. Sometimes they have scheduled maintenance. Sometimes it's just down for no reason. So apply at least 30 days before, but obviously the sooner the better. If you can apply earlier, it's really important that you do that. I find a lot of our students find themselves in bad situations when it comes to their extension because of their passport. Your passport is expiring. You're not able to have your passport extended in time, whatever the case is. Number one, ensure that you extend your passport sooner rather than later, because a permit cannot be issued further than the validity of your actual passport. So if your passport is expiring, you might find yourself in trouble. So number one, ensure you extend that passport as soon as possible. Extend your status in Canada before at least 30 days before it expires.
Absolutely, very important. And I would just add there too, because there was a case that came to us where the students did not extend their status on time because their passport had expired and they had not renewed their passport. They didn't have the ability to renew their passport, so they felt that they could not submit an application. So I just want you to know, if you're in that situation, don't wait to renew your passport before you submit an application for extension. Use that passport that has expired in your application. Include an explanation to IRCC, in addition with proof that you are doing the work to actually get that passport renewed, and submit your extension. Have that extension in before your status expires so that you don't get in trouble, because they will not forgive it. We've literally seen a GCMS note where the officer said they could have applied with the expired passport and offered an explanation. So I'm telling you, this is not information you see online or on IRCC's website, but of course this comes from experience. So when in doubt, you just want to get more information, but don't get out of status because it complicates so many other things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the good thing with applying while you're, while your permit is still valid is you maintain the conditions in your study permit. You can continue studying, you can continue working. But if you fall within the restoration period, so let's say your permit expires, you have 90 days to restore. When you're in a restoration period, you have to stop studying, you have to stop working, you have to stop everything. So the best thing that you can do for yourself is apply ahead of time so you maintain your status.
Yeah, absolutely. Work regulations.
Do you want to take this one or should I?
Yeah, I can go ahead. So with the working on campus, when you work on campus, that's the only time that you can work more than 40 hours. Funny enough, as international student, there's no restriction when you get a job on campus and you're doing it. So always check the definition of what IRCC considers campus on your campus. So check with your international students office for that. But working off campus is still 20 hours per week. IRCC promised us 24 hours in September, but this has not been implemented at this time. So please do not work more than 20 hours. IRCC has ways of verifying. They could call your employer to send a report on how many hours you're working. They could through CRA. There are different ways that they can verify what they need to. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation, because this is another reason why statuses don't get extended or PGWP are not, people become ineligible for PGWP, working more than the hours that are allotted. And I think we've been talking about this all through what we've been saying so far, so we're just going to touch on it again.
Absolutely. So first one, delayed program start. So let's say you're supposed to start school in September, came to Canada, you didn't start in September. You didn't change your status. You didn't leave the country. You've just sat in Canada up until maybe May, right? So the wording is you need to you need to continue your studies within 150 days or the next semester, whichever one comes sooner. So in your situation, if you came for September, you didn't start in September, you need to start by January. January is the next semester. If you exceed January, change your status. Change your status either to a visitor, worker, if you're eligible to change to worker, or leave Canada. If you don't, you're going to find yourself in trouble.
Yeah. And and then arriving in Canada without attending school, we talked about that. That is pretty popular. And it's also the reason why IRCC just gets so strict with everything, because people thought IRCC thought people were coming for school, and then they arrive and they're not going to school. So one of the things that you want to avoid is being that type of situation. Instead of staying here and being out of status, you're better off going back home and then coming back when you're actually ready to start the program and study. So it's really important, because it just takes something little to really ruin the whole process as well for everyone. Okay, so we're going to touch on PGWP eligibility as well here. This is what you see on the screen is what the eligibility is right now summarized. We know that effective November 1st, you need a language test. There were certain fields that need to be tied to area of labor demanding Canada for you to be eligible. Bachelor's, master's, doctorate program are completely still eligible no matter what you study, no matter the field of study. And that's quite a bit. That's a lot. There's a lot of opportunities still there to be eligible for PGWP, but you need to be aware of these other ones and the fact that you need to have your IELTS now. So with those IELTS and planning, and the next slide here, Asha is going to be talking about the general eligibility for PGWP. You need to plan ahead, right? Because you want to register for it. The good thing with the IELTS here is that you could use it towards your PR plans and also your PGWP application as well. So it's very, very important, and your compliance with your study permit regulations and obligation is going to really determine if you're eligible for a PGWP amongst other requirements that IRCC has set out.
Okay, perfect. So a couple different types of general eligibility. The first one is completing a program at a DLI. So what I will say is not every single program at a DLI is PGWP eligible. Before all of this came into effect, it was always that way. We had programs where you get approved for a study permit, but you would not get approved for PGWP because the school or the program was not PGWP eligible. So step number one is you complete your program at a DLI that's PGWP eligible. Obviously, now we have different requirements, so it's going to have to be in line with one of the eligible fields of study. The second thing is you need to maintain full-time status during your studies. The only exception to this, as Florence mentioned earlier, is the final semester. The final semester, if you have part-time studies, that's allowed. But if you have part-time studies at any other point in time, there's a chance your PGWP application may get refused, because when you look at the document checklist for a PGWP application, what they want to see is your completion letter, and they also want to see your transcript. Your transcript is how they're going to determine what your course load was like, right? And we have seen officers actually go through and they really look at the transcripts. You'll see GCMS notes and they'll say, this student was, maybe they did, let's say, a 4-semester program. The first semester they did full-time. The second semester they did part-time. The third semester they did full-time. And the fourth semester they did part-time. They will go in and list out exactly which semesters you did full-time, which ones you did part-time. So the best way to avoid all of this is just maintain your full-time course load until that final semester, and then you should be fine. Number 3, you want to apply within 180 days of graduation. So that day that you get your official completion letter, the clock starts ticking, right? So there's 2 things to note here. The clock starts ticking there. Number 2, you have to stop working, right? So the day you get your official completion letter, you finish school, you have to stop working up until the day you apply for your PGWP and you get that interim work authorization letter. So obviously, the sooner you apply, the better, just because you don't want to find yourself in a awkward situation or in a situation where you're tempted to work and you can't. So the best thing you can do is, as soon as you get your official completion letter and your transcript, apply for your PGWP. Number 4, do you want to add on?
Yeah, so with that particular one, is the tip is, you already know you're going to apply for PGWP, start working on the application so that the completion letter comes, you add it, you send it in, life doesn't change for you, especially if you have a job, right? So those are ways that you can mitigate that as well.
Absolutely. Number 4, hold a valid study permit during the 180 days after graduation. So when you're applying for your PGWP, in order to kind of maintain those conditions and be allowed to continue working, get that interim work authorization letter, at some point you have to have that valid study permit. So another thing that you guys should know is, despite the date that's printed on your study permit, it's going to be invalid within 90 days, right? So you don't want to find yourself, yes, you have 180 days to apply for your PGWP, but within those 90 days of you completing your studies, your study permit is no longer valid. So again, apply sooner rather than later. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're kind of out of status there, right? And then the last one is just meet all the general eligibility requirements. So all of the things that we've touched on here, obviously the ones that we touched on before, the eligible fields of study, the CLB requirements, and everything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just going to throw in something there. One of the things that we're noticing that IRCC is questioning in applications to our students who have come to Canada and they were supposed to complete a 4-year program, and the program has taken 6-7 years. There are students like that, and when you later come in to apply, and this is not for PGWP right now, I'm talking about study permit extension, we are seeing a lot of pushback from IRCC for extending these types of students. So if you're in Canada, you're studying, you're looking to switch program, there have been delays that happen, there are reasons why you just couldn't complete your program in a given time slot. You don't just throw in an application for an extension. You need to go prepared with a lot of explanation to convince the officer that you were indeed a genuine student and you're going to be a genuine student if this extension comes in as well, and explain what happened and why you've not been able to complete your program like you should have. So all of this really ties together to provide information when it comes to what you have to do as a student and how it plays into future and other applications that you need to do. And of course, your PGWP eligibility as well. Okay. So I think for most of that's most of what we wanted to talk about, the key things. Just remind everybody, we wanted it to be short and sweet, that you could watch this, you could share this with your friends. If you have any questions about what your options are, what you're eligible for, you know exactly what that is and how you can handle that. So what we're going to do here now is, I can see there have been questions as we've been talking, but we're going to open the floor now to questions. Asha will take questions on StreamYard. I'll bring questions over from Instagram. So we're going to do this. We have about 30 minutes. We're going to answer some questions here in the next 30 minutes. And of course, as usual, if your questions don't get answered here, you do have our contact details. I'll put that back on the screen. You can reach out to us. You can send an email. You can call the office. You can reach out to us on our social media platform. We're more than happy to work with you and direct you on what you need to do to maintain your status here. Okay, so the floor is open for questions. So leave your questions and we're going to take it from there.
Okay, I think we have one.